The deadly toll on journalists in Gaza is intensifying, raising global alarm over press freedom. On the 10th of August, an Israeli airstrike killed 5 Al Jazeera staff, marking one of the deadliest single attacks on media workers in the conflict. Since October 2023, more than 250 journalists have reportedly been killed, making Gaza the most dangerous place for reporters in the 21st century. With foreign correspondents barred from entering, local Palestinian journalists have carried the burden of documenting the war, and many have paid with their lives. A new coalition, African Journalists Against Genocide, has condemned what it calls Israel's deliberate targeting of reporters. The group, which unites media professionals from over 20 African nations, compared Gaza to Africa's own history of apartheid and colonialism. They are demanding sanctions and accountability, warning the silence makes international community complicit. Press groups worldwide argue that these killings violate international law. Journalists are civilians protected under the Geneva Conventions, yet in Gaza they are increasingly treated as combatants. Advocates say silencing them is an attempt to hide atrocities from the world. Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, founder of African Journalists Against Genocide, joins us now to talk about the killing of journalists, especially in Gaza and Africa. Good morning and welcome to Arise News.
How are you?
Very well,
thank you. See you all on a Sunday morning.
Yes, hope you're doing well this morning. Now we're talking about a very serious topic this morning. Freedom of press and journalists being killed in Gaza. Very recently, the airstrike that we spoke about that killed 5 Al Jazeera journalists, very importantly killed Anas Al-Sharif. And Israel has since said that they were targeting him, that the IDF was targeting him, because they believe that he was leading a Hamas cell. Now, how do you feel about, one, the large number of journalists that have been killed, but two, also the accusations that some of these journalists are not only terrorist sympathizers, but are also working for Hamas?
And let me come to the last question, and this is where it's ridiculous. Most people perhaps don't know, but it is worth reminding those who do know, that up until October 7th, Hamas was the government in Gaza. So it's a bit like me working for my local government, right? So journalists would naturally go and interview them. And what do we journalists do? When we interview guests, when we go to sites, we take pictures with them. So there is no record of Hamas being Hamas. In fact, Hamas was on TV. He was reporting so often. How exactly could he have covered any kind of terrorist operation or whatever? So, and the same goes to the doctors, the nurses, people in Gaza were working for a government, right? Some of them were paid for government, some of them were private sectors. Those who were paid by government were paid by Hamas. Hamas was a legitimate, democratically elected government of Gaza. So no, Israel's accusations is absolute nonsense. But let's even imagine it were true on the wildest Israeli scale. Where is the evidence? They have not given us any evidence. The only evidence they have given us is a picture that shows Anas taking a selfie, and that's it. So when I interviewed the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, the one thing I kept asking him is, where is your evidence? You can't just point a finger and say, okay, because Adesua went to interview the head of Boko Haram, which we would all want to do because we have queries for them. Then suddenly, she took a picture with them. That makes her, a terrorist. It doesn't make sense. However, but once Israel knows that once they label anybody as Hamas, they can get away with it. Anything goes.
Inexcusable.
It just permits them to do whatever it is they want. That's the long and short of it. However, to your first question, over 200.
Yes.
You get 250, you get 270. Why such, differing numbers? Because so many humans, people of Gaza, are still buried, that have been killed, are still buried under the rubble. So even up until yesterday, journalists have been discovered under the rubble. Up until 2 days ago, a female journalist was discovered under the rubble. So that's why the numbers keep going back and forth, because people have said to me, but, you know, some numbers say 200, some say 250, some, because, you know, and we will never actually know the full number, the actual number of the people that Israel has killed with these bombardments of Gaza until they actually stop bombarding Gaza.
Precisely. I was just about to get to that. The fact that, you know, one of the reasons why Anas's case is quite disheartening primarily is because, first of all, it's the circumstances that have been attached to his killing. The allegations of him being a member of Hamas, supporting terrorist organizations and the likes. That's probably why it's, but then there's other people that have died. There's other journalists that have been killed, like you rightly said, give or take 200 to 250, over 200 to 250.
About 270.
Possibly now at this point in time. So what does this say about, as journalists, because I think that's really where, I don't think this is ever going to stop. Right from 1995, in fact, one of the deadliest years we saw for journalists was during the Syria war, where there were so many more journalists killed. And we've seen it even with the Ukraine crisis as well. We keep seeing journalists being caught in the crossfire. So as journalists, how would you say, or what responsibility do we have, number one, to protect ourselves? And on who does the accountability or the responsibility fall to protect journalists?
Okay, so first and foremost, no, the killings, Israel's murdering and assassination of journalists in Gaza is the highest in the 21st century. They can try to deny it, but these are stats that have been confirmed by the likes of the, you know, IFJ, etc. It is the highest. So Syria, yes. Ukraine, yes. But it's, if you're talking about the Second World War, the First World War, like literally, this is the highest. So let that sink in. Journalists have been going to war zones to actually report for decades. Journalists are protected by international law. Because fundamentally, and this is what you must remember, that journalism is not a crime. Okay? So when you go as a journalist into, I went to Israel. I was the only Nigerian journalist to have gone to Israel immediately after October 7th. I was invited to come and cover. I was invited by the Israeli government to come and cover, right? And whilst we were there, bombs were going off. We were in Far Atza, which is one of the kibbutzim that was devastated by the Hamas incursion. We were in Far Atza, and that's literally Gaza. 3 kilometers across on a field through barbed wire fence. I literally would have been Gaza. So you can imagine the bombs were going. Well, nothing happened to us. We were given protective, you know, helmets, shields, etc. So it is not about, you know, whose responsibility it is for us to protect ourselves. No. It is the fact that we should not be targeted. It is about the fact that Israel is deliberately targeting journalists. But the question you must ask is why? It is the why that we must discuss, not the fact that we should be protecting ourselves or whatever. Why is Israel targeting journalists in Gaza?
So why is Israel targeting?
Yes, because, you know, because I did want to, you know, hone in on this, the why, right? Because apart from the you know, because they did say that the IDF did say they targeted Anas Al-Sharif. But of course, there were other journalists with him. So even if we do acquiesce that, or if we do agree that, oh, he was sympathetic to Hamas, there are other innocent journalists, civilians. There were 4 others who were seen as just, you know, they just died along with him and collateral damage, or collateral death. But you know, you're asking why they're targeting journalists. Now, I would pose that question to you, but also why they're not allowing international journalists to enter Gaza.
And it's the same answer. So they're targeting journalists because journalists are the eyewitnesses. Journalists are the ones who report what's going on the ground. You will find that immediately after October 7th, look, it's again, at this point, it is worth remembering that Gaza had something like 97 or so literacy rate. Yes, higher than Nigeria that wasn't under occupation. So they are highly educated people, highly educated. That's number one. Immediately, and literature. You know, if you see, they speak English, they speak Arabic, some of them even speak French. And because of the way where, they have always been good at recording and writing about their stories, they continue. What is storytelling? What is journalism if it's not telling a story? So to go back to your question, why are they killing? Because journalists are eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses are the ones who will report what they've seen on the ground. That is the one and only reason. Israel does not want any reporting. Israel does not want any eyewitnesses. Why is it they're not letting in the international? Why did they take me to Israel to go and see what's going on? But I can't go into Gaza. And I did ask whilst we were there if I may go into Gaza. Of course, we weren't allowed to go into Gaza. Why is that? For the same reason. For the same reason why they're killing journalists. We would be eyewitnesses. Now, here's the thing. One of the arrogance of it all is Israel will say to you, oh, because it's not safe, because we're protecting you, but you shouldn't be targeting me. So why do I need protection? Yes, there are times when journalists will die. Yes, it can be dangerous, but there is a process, there is a protocol to journalists going into war zones and actually being able to do their job safely. Things will happen. We're not saying things won't happen. So, curiously though, I'd like you to remember right now, Israel is taking over Gaza City. Anas would have been covering Gaza City. Why is Gaza City so important? Because Gaza City contains the vast majority of Gaza oil reserves. So you see everything, all the dots join. And as his father was killed before he was killed, they had warned them as a family. They warned him to stop. He kept saying he's not going to stop. And they warn a lot of journalists in Gaza actually do get this warning to stop. Israel doesn't want anybody, and without their eyes, without their sharp and courageous reporting, without their intelligence, and indeed their accuracy, we would be blind. We would all be blind to what's going on. And that's what Israel wants to stop.
And these are very salient points. I like that we talked about traveling across borders, some of these locations. I want us to bring this home to Nigeria, where we actually do not see things like this, where we have instances where there's so much happening across different parts of Nigeria with regards to insecurity. But would you say there are enough journalists covering these issues when they happen, how they happen? We've seen situations in Benue State, Katsina State. How would you assess the rate of reportage coming from these locations within Nigeria?
First and foremost, don't say we don't have this in Nigeria.
Where we do not have as much of this in Nigeria.
Forget whether
That's
it's as much.
I said
Numbers
in comparison, how would you assess
I wouldn't like
the
to
level
compare
of
it
reportage?
because when you detain journalists, it's only 1 second away from killing journalists. Last year, FIJ just released a report. In the first year of Tinubu's administration, over 20 journalists were detained. Detained for what exactly? Are they armed robbers? So no, I won't do that. We don't have as much. Because like everything else, everything inches closer and closer.
20
and next
journalists
thing,
were detained last year.
Over in the first year of Tinubu's presidency administration. Over 20. I didn't say 20, I said over 20. It is a report. It is a factual and accurate report.
If they were detained based off of their report on insecurity?
I don't know and I don't care.
My point is,
my point is I actually don't care.
No,
what
that's
I'm
valid.
saying
I'm
is
sticking to
they
insecurity.
were out doing their jobs. They were out doing their jobs and they were detained. Right? That's what we need to care about.
And that's
right?
a very valid point. But do you think we have
crime.
enough journalists covering cases of insecurity in Nigeria?
This is the second part of your question. I, for one, would like to go into any Benue, right? But I don't work for Arise. So the chances are, permit me, nobody's going to take me.
Why do you need to work for Arise
I'm talking about a big network.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm guessing that speaks to the funding of the job.
Yes, a big network. I don't work for a big network, right? But I'm going to say, I want to go in there. Now I've got to go through all this, military permissions, authorization, etc., right? And that's what happens. The people who are covering, this is what we must never ever forget. And this is what has been happening in Gaza. And this is it's an arrogance. The same arrogance that the people, the Western press apply to the journalists in Gaza is, it has to be us. It doesn't have to be us.
Who's
Those, it has to be those of us who think we're in the cities, we have to go and report it. Permit me to finish.
Okay.
Those of us, those on the ground who do cover, their voices are just as important. And we do have those in Benue, for instance, who do actually cover and they send out their stories. So what is not to have? Why is that not good enough? Why does an Ireti, I would love to, but why do I need to go there? If one of my colleagues is there and is reporting it quite rightly.
Yes, so I actually want to come in here because I do think it's a very important topic. But I was going to bring this in with Sudan. But if we're talking about Nigeria, you know, there are very important journalists doing this work, covering insecurity in Nigeria.
Absolutely.
I always on this channel love to shout out the Human Angle Network, because their journalists are doing incredible work going to these areas, talking about banditry in Zamfara, talking about people who've been attacked in Mina, talking about the recruitment of boys into terrorist organizations in the Kainji forest, and also the proliferation of terror across the Sahel. So we do have a lot of Nigerians doing this work.
There.
But as you also rightfully said, we also have an uptick in journalists who are being detained and arrested for their work, particularly using the Cyber Crimes Act. Now, it has been amended. It's been gazetted now, the amended Cyber Crimes Act, which is not as broad as the previous one, which was used to not only hamper journalists, but also common Nigerian citizens like Chioma Okoli when she made her tomato paste review. So we have seen a lot of Nigerian journalists doing this leg work, and even FIJ and Fisayo Shiombo going undercover. So we've seen even Umazi. We've seen a lot of people do a lot of courageous work in Nigeria, and they don't get the same type of maybe limelight or popularity as some of us who can sit on Arise News or on radio, and I think we have it easier here than a lot of our colleagues across the country. But also when we're talking about journalism, when we're talking about the importance of, as you said, being an eyewitness, right? But there's a very popular saying that if we don't write our stories, they'll kill us, and they say that that we enjoyed it, right? When we're talking, a lot of Africans have come to the table in this conversation, and this is a group of African journalists against genocide. But a huge part of the conversation in international media that seems to not really be had is Sudan and the crisis in Sudan. Also the DRC, but particularly in Sudan with the rapid...
And Haiti.
But the RSF in Sudan, because Haiti is maybe it's gang violence, it's not necessarily...
Well, it's engineered violence. It's engineered violence.
But when we talk about the state a state functioning in a way that's killing citizens, I think Sudan really does stand out. And so, why the focus on Gaza?
Good question. Excellent question. So, when I came up with AJAG, African Journalists Against Genocide, it was triggered by the murder of Anas and his colleagues. And I remember at the time, literally, it's just one of those things that comes to my head. I was so angry, I was incensed, I was crying, I couldn't understand. There's no way to make sense of the ridiculous. There's no way to make sense of deliberate murder, targeted murders. But I just thought, I need to do something. I'm not one of those people that just pick up my phone and start talking into it. It's just not me. Some people do it very well. I don't. But I thought there must be other journalists out there who want to do, who feel the same way as I do. That's number one. Number two, what we were seeing also was, you often get voices of condemnation and recrimination. They're from the West, always from the West. And African voices were not out there. And I thought to myself, people will think they won't know the work we're doing over here in Africa, in Nigeria. That's why I literally just put out the word. And it's insane. We have like almost 150 members on the group right now. And I just wrote, I said, look, this is what I want to do. If you want to do it, submit your short video. I give them a script outline. Do it from your place, wherever you are, and send it through. And that's how we got, the video, which I hope you will play. That's what drove it. Immediately, we got together as Africans. The one thing we said we were going to be doing was Sudan. Because again, what has happened is borders have separated us. African journalists had not been speaking. They didn't have a space to speak as one. We didn't even have now on AJAC group, you can say, right, I want to cover Sudan, who can give me, you know, inside information. I want to cover, you know, Congo, who can give me inside information? Because we're represented across Africa now. And we didn't have that before. So again, we have to depend on Western narratives and the news report that they're giving us in order for us to actually do our work and speak about, you know, crises and conflicts and wars that actually affect us. So Anas triggered it off, the conflict, the genocide in Gaza triggered it off. On my show Borderlines, I have covered DRC, Haiti, Afghanistan, Sudan. I mean, I had a wonderful guest 3-4 weeks ago talking about Sudan. So it's something that I do as a matter of course, especially as a Pan-Africanist, especially as one who cares inherently, I care deeply for my continent. But here's the thing though, Gaza is the test bed. And that's what people don't realize. Gaza is the test bed for what they eventually plan to do to us and what could happen to us. And I'll tell you why I say that. The next lot of dictators that you get in Africa, they will be able to get away with whatever it is they want to get away with because Israel is getting away with the same thing in Gaza. Something that would have been abhorrent, something that would have created global outcry, is now been licensed to continue. Not a month, not 3 months, it's continued for over 600 days. So when we scream and shout about what's going on in Gaza, we are literally saying, this could happen to us. Let's all talk out, let's all condemn it. Because if you look away from what's, I mean, Israel is not excluded from what's going on in Sudan. I mean, that's just, we don't have the time to talk about it, right? So it's all there. It's all by engine. And it's all, you know, capitalism, I always say, you know, capitalism is the wife of neocolonization, right? And they're all joined. And we must remember, those of us of the global south, there by the grace of God we go.
I want to just follow up on something you said about everything being joined, right? Because something that's very interesting that is happening recently is that Uganda has now come into agreement with America to receive people from third countries who might be denied asylum and their country does not want them back. At the same time, after South Africa took Israel to the ICJ on claims of genocide, it seemed that they were being punished by America. And part of the conspiracy theory in South Africa is that America is dropping their criminals and their rejects in Eswatini because it is essentially within South Africa's borders. And when you say everything is connected in this neo-colonial era, or in this new geopolitical era where we have...
I call it the Trump democracy.
The Trump era, where we also are having people being exported to Africa, and now reports that Israel has had conversations about deporting people of Gaza to Somaliland.
Absolutely.
How do you see us as Africans, right, and African nations going forward? Do we have leaders who are going to rise to the occasion? Particularly, you know, Nigeria recently has also said that they're pushing for the permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Do you believe that we have leaders who are going to rise to the occasion to help protect the people of Gaza, like Ramaphosa attempted to, but also protect the integrity of Africa when we have maybe the idea that we're now the dumping ground for unwanted people in other parts of the world?
Wow, I love this question because I won't get carried away. I'll try and make it short though. So first of all, isn't it curious that it's Uganda? Well, the same Uganda that the Zionists were considering, you know, before they were given the land of the Palestinians in 1947, they were considering Uganda. So it obviously, I mean, Herzl did not intend for it to be in Palestine because he didn't care, right? He wasn't a religious Zionist, right? So he was just a social Zionist, if you like, an activist. But and so that's curious. Number two is this idea, this sort of Trumpian, dystopian world that we're living in now, where you can just ship, you know, the undesirables of your country to Africa, and Africa becomes a new dumping ground. It's something that should scare us all. And I'm going to talk about Nigeria now. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, or VP of Foreign Affairs, whatever the title is, was in Nigeria just 2 weeks ago.
From which country?
From Israel, I beg your pardon. Was in Nigeria just 2 weeks ago. Did anybody put her in front of the press? No. Did we get to hear about it? No. Were we invited to do Q&A with her? No. But the next thing we see is her and Bianca Jagger, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, talking about Nigeria and saying agreements has been made. No sooner, some 24, 48 hours later, a story comes out that Israel and Nigeria are planning, they're planning to sign another security agreement, another security deal. Well, curiously enough, you probably may not know this, or at least your viewers may not. Nigeria spends some $10 billion or so, you know, over so many years on spyware. And our spyware is supplied by Israel is number one, China, and Russia. So you start to think to yourself, what's going on here, right? Now, this same lady was here. She left without us knowing anything. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs didn't say anything, didn't call, and that's one of the things that I think us as journalists, I would like my colleagues.
They sent out a press.
But we don't want a press release. We want to do a Q&A. We need to start demanding that when these people, when they come into Nigeria, they must do a Q&A with us, right? Too many world leaders come in, go into the villa and leave without answering to us. And that's the other thing we must change, and I'm hoping we'll be able to do that with AJAG. But going back to what I was saying, then you have that. Then you have, then you had this, then she went on a tour of Africa, right? The tour of Africa was to prepare for the sending, or the expulsion is the word, of Gazans to, you know, to Sudan. And you start to ask yourself, what is going on? Incidentally, if you go on the sites now, on the Israeli website, Israel-Nigeria website, it actually says that the ambassador is a representative in ECOWAS. How? Since when is ECOWAS not West Africa? Why does Israel have a representative in ECOWAS? It's all joined, right? Israel was expelled out of the AU a few years ago. Now, it is clear that there is some sort of campaign to get Israel back into the AU. Indeed, the Israeli embassy that has been closed, and I forget which African country it is now, the name came and it went, has now been reopened. So there's a pattern, and there is a deliberacy going on. There's a plan going on. And this is why, as Nigerians, look, there's something that people say, I only learned it again from AJAG. They say, Ghana is the Canada of Africa, Nigeria is the America, in terms of power and noise and fearlessness. So as Nigeria, as Nigerians, as Nigerian journalists, and our Nigerian government, look, Nigeria is not even part of the Hague group. Why not? Why is Nigeria saying we support the two-state resolution, you know, but they're not part of the Hague group? Why is our foreign minister saying, Nigeria, we support Palestine, the Palestinian state, but you're not part of the Hague group? Why have you not added your name to the South African case? You know, there's all these things that we need to do as a country, as well as journalists. We need to push our country, remind our leaders that, look, you owe this to the people, you owe it to us.
Some people might say that it's because we have too many problems here. We're facing our own problems first.
They can do that, but then that's why he also has what? I don't know how many people work for him. 50, 500 friggin', what do you call them, ministers? I mean, he has enough people. What are they all doing? The foreign ministers, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that's his job.
But I do want to say, because we do have to wrap this up, just speaking, and again, I just would really like to just hammer on that insecurity within Nigeria. With regard to the reportage, you didn't quite answer as to whether or not it is being reported on enough. and your own assessment? It's just
well, no, I think Adesua answered it. We are getting the reports.
Okay.
But what you get in Nigeria, I mean, I think, and I said something, she said, because we have a lot of problems, and that's the thing. In the old days, you would have this whole thing about drop the dead donkey in the newsroom because it's a slow news day. In Nigeria, there isn't such thing as a slow news day, right?
Yeah.
So just as this is happening, then you've got to move. And in all honesty, we have to give kudos to the media houses that have stayed open, because media is extremely expensive and it isn't easy. So, and doing, the likes of Tony Dara, who actually created and they brought the culture of, sort of where reporters, I've forgotten what we're calling now, where reporters go into the States and they start reporting from there. If you talk to them, they will tell you what it costs. If you speak to Kadri Ahmed and how she's able to keep Radio Now going, she will tell you it's not easy, I am drowning. So, what media houses are doing, and I'm sure your chairman will have a lot of stories to say.
I agree with you here, and I like to say, I really do like to highlight the work that our colleagues are doing. When you get a story about people dying in a mosque in Katsina on the same day where we're looking for bodies in Sokoto State, on the same day that IED explosions are happening in Borno, then you will know that the people who are reporting this are journalists who are reporting on insecurity across Nigeria.
Absolutely.
A lot of them do personal stories, a lot of them do investigative work, but they're not the ones who are technically famous.
The ones that you see.
They're not the ones that you see, but the work is being done. But thank you.
I really
so
praise
much for
them.
being here.
My pleasure.
I like that you responded to that.
My pleasure. And AJAG, African Journalists for Genocide. It's not just about Gaza. We're going to be doing a campaign on Sudan.
Against genocide. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a campaign on Sudan, on Congo, even Haiti, because Haiti, we know what's going on there.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to
seeing that.
Thank
you.